Hello, and here we are once again in Piam. As you can see behind me, we've got blue skies, we've got no rain, we've got very little cloud cover. It's all good compared to how it was last time you saw us. The weather pretty much has calmed down now, but as you know, it's been very bad here in Thailand. We had flash flooding across the country. At the last count, I think 36 people died, and hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of people were relocated and taken to places of safety. So it's not just been a mild inconvenience for us here on Espa, it's been a serious concern for Thailand itself.
Yeah, and it's affected their tourist industry as well. People have prevented from coming over because roads have been closed, transport can't run, and it has affected other yachties as well. Further down south in Phuket, we've seen some pretty nasty photographs and video footage, boats being upturned. On the north of Lanta, a pleasure vessel broke its anchorage and got washed ashore and then was dismasted when it hit the shore. They had to be towed by the Thai Navy back to Krabi Boat Lagoon boatyard. And even in old Lanta town, which we visited a few episodes back, there were a couple of local boats which got washed ashore as well, and that's a very protected anchorage. So it just demonstrates how bad this weather has been.
Yes, it's been terrible.
Okay, so on to our main subject for this episode, and it's appropriate that we're still in Koh Phangan because this features someone who I met when I first came to Koh Phangan last year and who we met again last week. His name is Manuel, and he runs Project Manaya, Research Through Exploration.
He's someone we follow on Patreon. We do follow a number of other people, for instance Delos, who we admire greatly. But he's slightly different, Manuel, because although he's not as polished as people like Delos, he's doing something that we think is really worthy and interesting and full of information about the marine environment and how we can find ways of improving it and understanding what the problems are.
I'm Manuel, Austrian marine biologist, I know, weird combination. And I'm skippering Sea Nomad, which is a 45-foot catamaran that was kindly donated to us by Luca, who used to run expeditions in the Murgui archipelago, and this is what we are taking over right now. It's Myanmar, now Myanmar, used to be Burma, and it's a chain of about 800 to 2,000 islands, depending on which countings you trust. So what we are trying to do in this particular part of the world is to do some baseline research. So basically the Murgui Islands is one of the last kind of white spots on the world map. So there's no decent charts, there's no knowledge about animals, there's no knowledge about wildlife underwater or on the islands. So there's nothing there really. So basically everything you document in these particular islands is brand new to the world of science. And ultimately the goal would be to declare the entire thing as one big protected area with the backup of UNESCO, for example. But right now we are, well, one season in and 3 expeditions down, and we already managed to do a nice detailed survey of one of the islands called Boulder Island. And with that in hand, the owner of the island is actually going to hand it in to the government and try to get one marine protected area out of it, which would be one step in the right direction, but ultimately we have to do a lot more still. But yeah, the thing is, there's huge potential in these islands and there's an amazing sort of wildlife there. I mean, within the first half year that we spent there now, we managed to document, I think it was 17 different species of coral alone that are all red listed and are somewhat threatened. We had a couple of bird species that were red listed as well, and the same for plants, animals on the islands. So there's a lot of, well, wildlife in all sorts really that is still there and nobody really knows about it. And now the idea is not to go there and, well, chase them again. The idea is to keep the habitat as it is. So protecting the islands is something that has to happen now before it opens up even more and this resource.
This is something that you have to do in partnership with the local people, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So we already partnered up with Moby Dick Tours, which is a Burmese or Myanmar company, and with people from Myanmar, and we talked to Bjorn, who is the owner ultimately, And there's actually an attempt of funding another NGO specifically for Murgui that would then kind of subcontract us to do the research work, and then this particular NGO could be the one to approach the governments, to hand in proposals, to, well, do all the, let's call it, legal work on the ground, since it is kind of a weird situation for an Austrian NGO to walk into a Myanmar government and say, hey, I really think that these islands should be protected. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's fine if we do the groundwork and we do the research, but then, I mean, just for face-to-face sort of conversation, it's always better to be on the same level, come from the same background, come from the same country. So partnering up with somebody local really is the way to go.
Yep. And so you've mentioned the wildlife, but you mentioned briefly also the soundings and the identification of islands as well. And I was looking at some of the charts for Myanmar, the nautical charts, and there are entire islands missing from the charts. And yep. You showed me some of the, you know, this is what I really like, was the technical side of things.
Yeah.
And the soundings that you're taking are pretty in-depth, if you'll excuse the pun. They are very, very comprehensive. So what kind of equipment are you using for that?
So we got a, what is it, Lawrence echo sounder, which is a, well, not side scan, but wide scan sonar. So it covers an angle of 120 degrees to the sides. Well, which we have on the boat non-stop, and we have it running, and we keep recording the data that we collect, and then you kind of sync it with your tide charts, and you can actually make maps out of what you collect anyways. It's just a matter of recording it and using the data. And then in addition to that, whenever we are near an island or anchored at an island, we put the same device on the dinghy and just do runs across the bay over and over and over again. And that way we can get highly detailed charts for particular islands or for particular bays, which is useful for us because we eventually will come back to them, and then at least we know where the shoals are and where we can safely anchor. Mm-hmm. But we also want to publish them well, on the web for everybody to access them, which is like Open Sea Map, it's called. So kind of like Google Maps, but for the sea, and everybody can contribute and add their data to it. And in the future, we actually just recently got the Open ROV donated. Yep. And there's ways of making 3D reef charts. So that's going to be the next step for the next season.
Just talking a bit more about Patreon and the funding, can you tell us where you're at the moment in terms of the financial situation and what you're doing with the boat currently?
Well, right now we are on Patreon already. We have 3 supporters, the biggest of which is holding the camera right now. And, well, the boat that we got is, well, let's just say it was neglected for a few years and was in Myanmar sitting on anchor in a dirty river. So obviously it is a lot of work, and now we finally have the, I almost call it luxury, of having it out on the hard for half a year and getting some work done. And we already started exposing the hull and, well, finding cracks that need fixing, and the interior needs to be redone. So we are looking at a lot of money that we have to spend on it, unfortunately. And yeah, which is part of the reason why I'm going back to Europe now, to try fundraise a little bit, and then I'm going back to work to earn some money to pour it back into the boat, just to keep going, because, well, waiting another year is not really an option.
So before we go back to see what Project Pinar is doing, we've got some questions which we thought we should answer. First one is from Lance Selkirk from YouTube, and he says, what is the difference between SV and SY?
Very good question. And in fact, I had to go away and look this up because I wasn't sure of the answer. The short answer is there is very little difference. To those that don't know, SV stands for sailing vessel and SY stands for sailing yacht.
That's all I knew. That's
pretty much all I knew as well. The only other thing I was aware of was that Americans like SV, and the Brits and the Aussies and some parts of the continent prefer SY. Now, SY traditionally used to stand for steam yacht, if I remember. I think so, yes. Wow. But there is no real absolute answer, and there, as far as I can see, there is no official answer either. They're interchangeable. Of course, when you hail someone on the VHF, you don't use either. We try to be as succinct as possible on the VHF, and especially if you're doing a mayday, we would literally just call out, this is Esper, 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 and we wouldn't bother with SY or SV. But essentially, choose either.
Yeah.
And there's so many abbreviations or prefixes to boat names.
Yeah, it's a personal choice.
It is personal, it's completely personal. Just out of interest, do you know what the prefix is for Titanic?
No.
Have a guess, go on.
MV.
MV, no. Someone on the internet suggested it should be SS because it's screw steamship.
Oh.
But it's not. RMS.
Royal something ship.
Yeah, now RMS, again, there are two definitions of RMS. One is Royal Mail Steamer and Royal Merchant Ship.
Okay.
And it was called Royal Mail Steamer because it took the mail of the King, I think it was the King, wasn't it, at the time? Over to the States. It was RMS Titanic. There we go. Little bit of knowledge for you.
So we don't really know. We googled most of that. All we know is what they stand for.
Just go for what you feel is what you're most comfortable with. The other interesting thing that I did come across was on an American forum, there seems to be some kind of reverse snobbery with the term yacht. A lot of Americans don't seem to be comfortable with the term yacht because it has snobbish connotations. Did you know this? No. I mean, I'm generalising here, but this came up quite a few times, that people were uncomfortable calling their boat a yacht. Now, to us Europeans, this is a yacht. I think to Americans, you have to be Roman Abramovich to have a yacht.
Okay, so this would be a sailboat. Maybe.
Who knows?
I have noticed that Americans say sailboat, which isn't a term we use. Whereas for us, a yacht is this, and an Abramovich type thing is an ocean-going vessel.
Yeah, but that's a super yacht.
Super yacht.
Yeah, well, anyway, there we go. We're none the wiser.
Rob Bradley of Patreon, and he says, what sort of battery life do you get, and do you have a backup? Also, what sort of distance do you get before your drone starts not to respond?
It's claimed to be 20 minutes. I fly it for 10 minutes and then start getting agitated. So by about 12 minutes, I'll start to bring it back towards the boat. The most I've ever got out of it is 15 minutes, but that's really pushing it. We are hoping in the new year.
That's now?
Yes, we're going to have a new toy. Yeah. And we'll talk more about that if we ever get it.
Yeah. Final question then from Winded Voyage of YouTube, who says, would love to hear more about your Red Sea and further sail. Being in the Med, I'm very curious about going the other way round, as you have. Lots to say there.
Yes, well, for those who don't know, we actually started in Turkey and went east, or we actually went southeast. We went down the Red Sea rather than going the traditional route west. We documented the whole thing. Back in those days, we were very much into blogging.
Yep.
And our blog, which is, 14, 15 years old now, has a lot of articles on those locations. And we also did a series of podcasts, which we have just started republishing. We mentioned this a few episodes ago when we talked about the Sailing Road, who interviewed us about our sailing escapades. And so on the back of that, we decided to republish our podcasts. So you can find them on our website and also on iTunes. Just look up Follow the Boat. Yeah,
we'll put links down in the description, both to our blog and to the podcast. But there's a massive amount of information there which could keep you going for weeks, I should think. Okay, so now we're going to go back and find out what happened with Manuel when we caught up with him this year.
Well, since last year we did run expeditions into Murgui. We did propose our first no-take zone on Boulder Island. We did make a couple of charts. We did make a preliminary survey for one of the islands. We did, of course, keep pushing the whole idea back at home. And we did a big refit to the boat again, just now the last 2 months in Phuket.
Yep.
And now we're headed back up into Murgui, and this year actually being stationed out in the islands. So the boat is going to be anchored or moored on a fixed buoy in Boulder Bay, which is on Boulder Island, and we will run expeditions from there, which saves us the hassle of going into Kathong, which is not really the most pleasant place to be. Plus we have the option to stay out non-stop and actually get a whole lot more work done.
This is really good news. So do you have anyone coming out to visit and stay on the boat?
We do have one volunteer coming actually in Oh, next weekend. Then we have one expedition going up to Longborough Island, which is one of the 3 biggest ones in the archipelago, in the beginning of February. And that's it so far, but we're also planning to do day trips from the island to surrounding islands.
So is this an opportunity to give a shout out, a call out for anyone that may be looking to come and join you?
Yeah, so if there's people interested in, well, helping with research work, or maybe there's people who have something in mind that they would love to do in a remote area, and they have like a whole system and a whole idea of what exactly they want, what they need, and where they want to go, yep, give us a holler anytime.
Okay, well, you heard it here first. So please get in touch with Manuel either via his Patreon page or on his YouTube channel or the website as well. We'll put the links in the description below for you guys to check out. I have to bring this up because people who are watching quite often a lot of people are wannabe liveaboards, and they, I think they wonder why Esper has so many technical and mechanical problems. You've had your own mechanical problems in the last few days, haven't you?
Let's just say once or twice in the last years, yeah. Well, basically, while we were in the shipyard, we had the engines pulled out completely, brought them to a mechanic, he did a complete overhaul, and we started moving up from Phuket to here, which should have been a 4 to 5 day trip, nice calm sailing, and for the first 3 days everything worked brilliant. We didn't even start the engines, and well, eventually we had to fire up the engines, and they worked great for a couple of hours, and then one of our damping plates snapped, so we lost the power on the port side engine and had to seek shelter because we couldn't fight the wind with only one engine. And then I spent a couple of hours swearing along in the engine compartment and
that's normal,
and fixing it up, and it worked again, and we made another move towards Payam to meet up with you guys, and yeah, we made it fairly close, just the wrong beach on the southern end of the island, and then supposedly the same thing happened again, and I was like, come on. And Payam seems to be the last place where you can actually get a hold of a mechanic who's not scared of working on a sailboat.
Yeah.
So we stumbled into Buffalo Bay, where we are right now, and well, yesterday a mechanic came and he managed to fix it, which turned out to probably only be a Morse cable issue, but still there's always issues coming.
Yeah, interesting you mentioned the Morse cable, because I think I told you yesterday that when Liz and I first started, and we knew very little about boats and engines, we had an identical problem which we thought was the gearbox, and that gearbox went on a big journey of Turkey to every single mechanic possible who kept returning it saying there's nothing wrong with it. Turned out it was the Morse cable. So that just shows you how sometimes, you know, when you think there's something wrong with an item on the boat, it's not necessarily what you always think it is, and it's really comes down to, I guess, learning, doesn't it? You sort of you learn along the way, really. Yeah. And it just means that if it happens next time, you're going to know exactly where to look first.
Yep. Well, that's the pleasure of getting to know your own boat.
Absolutely, yeah. By the way, all the footage that you see on this clip, that's all Manuel's, none of it's mine, it's all Manuel's. He's very kindly lent it to us just to give you an idea of what he does and what it's like up there. Having seen all that footage, wow, it's incredible, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, that's why I keep coming back. And yeah, you're welcome anytime.
Thank you.
Give a holler.
All right, don't forget, check out those descriptions below, and if you feel like supporting Manuel and his project, then please do, because it's our favourite project on Patreon.